The purpose of this video is to help you to better understand the purpose and how to annotate a primary source document or an article or something like that. Obviously, the whole point of annotating is to help you to have a much more deeper understanding of the document or the article than you would if you just simply read the article one time through. You probably are going to miss a bunch of things that way. Now, when we annotate, there's a variety of things that we should be looking at or considering. The first one is context. I'm just going to write that down here at the bottom just so we have a listing and we know. Context deals with when was this thing written, who wrote it, why did they write this thing. Ultimately, we're trying to uncover why they wrote it, who's the intended audience, and the date, and those kinds of things. And so it gives us a much better sense of what was going on at the time when this particular thing was written, which might help us to understand better why the person was writing what they wrote. Okay, so the first thing is context. We're going to look at the titles, only because a lot of times the titles will give us hints as to what the rest of the document is about. Then we're going to start to jump into what are the author's claims. In many cases, they're trying to get somebody to do something, or they're claiming something, and you've got to be able to pick those out. What are their claims? What are their statements that they're making that they're eventually going to support with evidence? Okay. Then we move into purpose, and we're going to be looking at trying to uncover the purpose that the author is writing this. Generally there's two purposes. There's a literal purpose, the kind of superficial one that they might flat out just tell you about. And then there's what we consider kind of the human condition purpose, which might be what's the bigger picture, what's the bigger point they're trying to make to you that they may not flat out say, but if you take all the information in the article in its entirety, then you might be able to figure out, well, what's their bigger statement here that they're trying to make, rather than just the few little statements that they might come out and just blatantly tell you. And so we're looking for both of those kinds of purposes. Then we've got what we'll refer to as the appeals, okay, and how is the author appealing to their audience. And we look at that in a number of ways. And we always say ethos, which refers to the credibility of the author and what credibility or expertise do they have to be writing something like this. Why should we believe them? Why do we believe that they know what they're talking about? We have logos, which basically deals with how have they logically written this. When they make a claim, are they backing that claim up with evidence? Are they breaking the claim down into sub-claims and then backing each one of those up with evidence? How are they dealing with organizing the piece? Okay? And then finally we've got pathos, which really is an emotional appeal, okay, or a claim. A good example of somebody who used pathos a lot in his speeches was a guy like Adolf Hitler, where much of what he had to say wasn't necessarily based in any kind of fact, but he got you so emotionally fired up and played on your emotions that he was able to mobilize an entire country and get almost an entire country behind him to go out and conquer the world, because they felt like they were superior, not based on anything other than an emotional thing. And his way of organizing things got you very emotionally fired up. So he appealed to his audience in an emotional way, and that would be the pathos piece. Are they using any emotional things that way to help you? And then finally, we're going to look at rhetorical devices or different ways of writing that might help them. Things like word choice. Are they using lists? Are they juxtaposing? Are they alluding to things that have happened in the past to help you understand things better? So we're going to start to pick some of those things out. Okay. So here I'm looking at this, determining point of view. When I annotate, I'm going to be making notes all over this to help me understand. And I'm just going to kind of go through my different categories that I need to hit in order to do that. And so the first one I'm going to look at is context. So I'm going to pick out, okay, do I have any information here on when this was written? Well, I've got this right here. I'm going to circle it and I'm going to say date. Okay, and I know it's in 1916, but I don't want to just say, oh, here's a date. Okay, there's a date, but what is that date telling me? 1916, what do I know about this? This might have been taking place, or this was taking place during World War I. And so I'm going to make a note of that it puts me in the setting of World War I and that something's going on there. Okay, who are they writing to? Who's the intended audience? To HRM, Her Royal Majesty's government. Oh, okay, so the audience is, I'm going to put this down here, audience, English's government, or England's government here, because I know that HRM, Her Royal Majesty, okay, and I might even do that, Her Royal Majesty, just so I know that. Okay, and that's what England referred to their government as. And so I know somebody during World War I, England was part of World War I, speaking to the government, and I know that. Okay, now who is the author of this? Well, I've got it down here, William Shetfield and Sons Garments. Okay, so I'm going to say author. But once again, it's not enough just to say, oh, that's the author. What else can I understand from this? Well, William Shetfield and Sons Garments. Oh, okay. So they are a business that makes clothes or deals with clothing in some way. Okay? So maybe that gives me some insight into what's going on here. Okay? And so notice as I annotate these things, I'm not just picking out, oh, here's some context, here's some context, here's some context. I'm also jotting down notes of what that context might be to help me understand the bigger context. Okay, so what I could say, just to kind of summarize what I figured out here, is that I've got a clothing manufacturer writing a memo to I'll just say HRM, but England's government during World War I. I'm not exactly sure why, but I know these things are going on here. Okay, and so I know this is taking place during what puts me in a frame set, a different frame of mind, so I understand when and where this was written. So now I would go through, I would read the rest of this. I'm going to look for a title. This is not a title, this is just a title of the assignment. So I'm going to say title, no title, no help. Right, so that's not going to help me. But at least I'm documenting that. Okay, I did look for that. Now I go through here and I make some claim. I'm going to start looking for some claims, and they've done some exhaustive studies revolving around head wounds. Okay, they've reached the following conclusions. That's kind of a word choice to let me know that here comes a claim, and based on their conclusions, we conclude this. Oh, here's a claim. Okay, and I'm going to say claim, big increase in head wounds. Okay, and I know it says it there, but I'm not just saying, oh, claim, big increase in head wounds, make a little note to myself on that. 47%, wow, okay, that's pretty good. Traumatic head injury since this particular time, all right. There you go, all right. As I read on, our firm is confident that you will reverse the fatal decision of February. Oh, so there was a decision made in February, and these guys want to reverse it. So I'm going to say, I got purpose here, right? The purpose of this is to get the government, and this I think is a literal one, right? It's flat out telling me, literal, reverse, the decision to go with steel helmets. Sounds like steel helmets aren't working out real good. They're kind of making that claim here. Okay. Now, if I look at Appeals, what's the credibility of this guy? I don't know. They make clothing. I'm not sure what their credibility is, but they've tried to show us that they're credible in that. They've done exhaustive studies. I've got some word choice. So I'm going to highlight that. That's pretty big. Exhaustive. Wow. They've looked at everything. Or at least trying to make the claim that they have. Right? Oh, fatal decision. Wow. Okay. This was a terrible, terrible decision. And they want it reversed. How could you not agree, right? They've done exhaustive studies on this, intensive studies. So they haven't just come up with one thing. They've really looked into this a lot, I guess is what they're trying to tell us. Okay? And so, are they making any emotional appeals here? Violent engagements, intensive studies, traumatic head injuries. Okay, I think they're probably making some emotional appeals here of how violent and traumatic this is. I think that everybody understands war is a terrible thing, but they've looked at all the violent things and all, and how traumatic these things are and the fatal decisions. I think they're trying to play on how tough war is and how horrible this is probably for the soldiers. So there's probably some pathos here. Okay, and so I'm going through, are they using any rhetorical? Well, I certainly listed, trying to pull this out as, emphasizing this. So no matter what, whenever you list, right, it draws your eyes' attention to that. That's the one thing you're going to see and focus on a little bit, and they want that to be the thing that they focus on. Okay, and so as I go through all of this, what I'm really trying to uncover is I'm understanding this a little bit better. They've done exhaustive, intensive studies on this thing. This is what they've concluded. It's been a terrible thing to go for that. So now I have to start asking the question, what's the bigger purpose here? What's the human condition? What's the bigger thing they're trying to get at? Okay, so I've got a garment maker who is not happy with the decision, or believes the decision to go to steel helmets was a fatal decision. It should be reversed. Okay, well, what kind of helmets did they use before this? What would they go back to? And I think they probably wore leather helmets before. Okay, and if you look at older footage of people in war, they either didn't have helmets or they wore leather helmets. Well, okay, who would make those leather helmets? Well, you've got garment makers who might do that, right? And so if the government has made the decision to go to steel helmets, right, then clearly they're no longer going to be using leather helmets, and that's not good for who? It's not good for the garment makers, right, who are standing to lose money because they're no longer making helmets, leather helmets for the Army, and they really want this thing reversed. So I would say what are these guys really getting at here is, look, go back to leather, and hey, guess what? We'll be the ones to supply the helmets. Go back to leather, we'll make the money. Notice they really didn't want to come straight out and say, look, we're upset we lost business here and we want to make money off of war. You can't come out and say that. So they had to go about and make this argument that everything else was a horrible decision to go to these steel helmets, look at all the extra injuries we have, all those kinds of things. Ultimately, in the end, hey, you need to reverse this decision because it's not working out for our soldiers. But hey, we'll go back and we'll be in a great position here to be able to provide these leather helmets that were clearly better, right? And they've left out a lot of other information now that I kind of think in those terms. But that's the whole point of annotating is I'm going to mark this thing up, but I've got to leave myself notes. I've got to go through and hit all these different things and make sure I go through those and make it look like I'm making attempts at pulling those things out to help me better understand the overall picture of what might actually be going on here. If I just read through this thing one time, it would, hey, I guess steel helmets aren't great. That would be the whole message. But really, we've got a lot deeper, much better point of view in figuring out what these guys were really getting at by simply spending time on it, trying to annotate and figure out some things based on what's contained in there.